So here we go. First things first, we're going to take the calipers off. Everything on this BMW seems to be Torx. So we got the sensor for the ABS. We're just going to pop that out. And then there's a clip in behind here that you're going to have to pop off. So there it is, pulled out, and then we're going to pop the caliper off of the rotor and let it hang out of the way. Exact same thing this side, minus the ABS. And sometimes it's hard to get them off because of the ridge when they're really worn. So I got the bike strapped up here with the jack underneath it because we're going to be pulling the front wheel off. So we got the axle tool going in. This tool has a 3/8 drive, but we don't want to use that. So you can just grab a 19, it's handy, it's actually written right on there, and a breaker bar, and have at it. Get that on there, it's going to be a lot easier than trying to use a 3/8 drive. It just pops right off. I'm going to loosen the front wheel chock here. I'm just going to jack the bike up so that we get a gap underneath it because we're going to drop the whole front end of this lift off. These lifts at DIY Motor are awesome for this. We'll pop the pin out to give us a little bit of clearance. Take this piece out right there. And then we can come take this whole front end and drop it down. Look at that. And we are freewheeling, baby. Yep. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull the axle all the way out and drop the wheel down, put it on the bench, get to work. So why are we changing this? Well, the customer measured the thickness and it was below the minimum, which is actually written on the rotors on every motorcycle I've ever seen. There's also quite a big ridge outside of the pad sweep, so you can see what the original thickness was, and then where the pads go, it's actually worn down quite a bit. Just set this aside over here for a sec. So the Galfers come with new buttons, new hardware and everything, which is awesome. So this is the front pads and we'll just get the rotors set up ready to go. I'll throw those over here for a sec. Pull that out. So we got specific instructions for the BMW, and we got some generic ones, just basically how to take the brakes off the bike. We've already done all this stuff, so we'll file this over here. This is what we really need. It shows how the stack up is of the hardware, the buttons. So I'm gonna use some brake cleaner here, and we're just gonna wipe everything down. They're stainless, there shouldn't be much on it, but if there is any oil, we want to get that off. And here I'm just making sure that everything is going to line up, all the bolt holes, and we need the ABS ring swapped over, obviously, onto the new rotor. The instructions say we're going to put the washers on top of the ABS ring. Put the ring on first, and we're going to grab the thick washer, there we go, and pop that on there. So that's going to go on all the way around there. Place the rotor on top, making sure to drop a washer, so we have to redo it. And then we got the thin washer going on the top of the rotor, and the wave washer goes on top of that, and then the button's going to go through all of that, flange side down, obviously. The original bolts had thread locker on it, but we're not just going to throw them back in. I want to clean that off. The wire wheel makes short work of that. It's nice and clean. Look at that. Now that we've got them all cleaned up, we're going to put some new thread locker on it before we assemble everything. So I'm just going to go hand tight on all of them to start out with in a star pattern, and then we'll torque them down. So I got them all in. I'm going to grab the torque wrench, set it to the factory spec, and we're going to go in a star pattern again, torque everything down. We'll do the same thing the other side, minus the ABS ring. Pow! Look at that, beautiful. And we're gonna move on to the pads and clean up the calipers a bit. This is a caliper slide pin, so the pads slide on this pin that goes through the middle. It holds the pads in place, but they slide through that slot there. You can see how corroded it is. And this is the right side pads, and one's thicker than the other. So obviously they weren't sliding together as a set, and you can see the left side pads have nice even wear. So when it's uneven, it could be because the pistons aren't coming out, but these ones seem to be fine. So I think it's just a buildup either on the pin itself or the spring clip that's in there too. So we're going to clean all of that up, just like we did. We're going to do it on both calipers, just to make sure that the pads are going to wear evenly when we put the new ones on. So the customer was complaining too that he was getting like a wobble or like a shimmy as he was braking. So it could be just because of the uneven wear. Here's the slide pin cleaned up, and we're going to put some lube on it too, just to help it out. And reassembled. Sorry, I lost a little bit of video, but we're going to be on to the rear. So here's the rear. It's a little bit different than the front. We got the retaining pin for the pads, and the carrier bolts will have to come off, then we can just pull that off. The wheel's going to have to come off too. Everything's Torx, as I said. So we'll get that off. So I'll undo the carrier bolts. Both. So this should just slide off, but there's quite a big ridge there, so just going to wiggle it to try to retract the pads enough to get it over that ridge. Clearly, there's a lot of rear braking going on here. The pads have to retract to get off of here. So the pad wear looks nice and even on these ones actually, but this ridge is huge. Like clearly there's a lot of rear brake going on with this customer. So we'll undo the lug nuts. Okay, so I got the wheel off, but to get it out, you actually had to take the exhaust mount off, loosen the clamp down there to get enough wiggle room. But now you can see how this is mounted to the hub there. The caliper bolts are partially hidden by the hub here, but BMW gives you a little access slot where you can fit a tool in there. But you're gonna need the long shank Torx to get in there. With all the bolts off, you can give it a wiggle. Should come off. Before I install new parts, especially aftermarket parts, I always want to make sure that everything's going to line up. The thickness is the same, the bolt holes are in the same place. And just like the front, we're going to clean the hardware up with the wire wheel. All right, all cleaned up, and we're going to add a dab of blue thread locker to it, just like the front, same thing. And I'm going to spin all 5 of these in just loosely, just to snug them up, and then we're going to torque them down. So I got a long extension on this torque wrench, which means I'm going to have to add a couple newton meters, raise the torque value on this just to make sure that they're going to actually torque down properly. So onto the caliper. This clip's going to have to come out to drive the pin out. I'm going to take the punch and I'm going to drive this pin out so the pads should just fall out right after this. It's a little sticky, but we'll twist and chow. So you can see it's a 2-piston caliper. There's only pistons on one side, which means these slide pins, I'm going to take it apart, re-lube everything, clean them up. So here's the carrier. You can see they're in good shape. The boots are in good shape. We're going to take everything that we can apart and clean everything and just put new grease on it. Might as well do it while it's apart. There's no reason not to. And there we go. That's what we can take apart. Clean it all up, re-lube, call it a day. I'll put some brake lube on the pin too, just so it slides easy. Basically anywhere the backing plates of the pads touch anything else, we want to lube that up. So the rotor's installed and torqued, and the pistons are pushed back in the caliper, so we should just be able to slide this on and bolt it down. And as always, we'll torque it down to the factory setting. Put the wheel back on and torque the lug nuts down to the factory setting as well. And there we go, brand new Galfer wave rotors and pads installed, front and rear all the way around on this BMW R1200RT. Be good for another 100,000 kilometers.